everybody. Thank you for tuning back into this week's episode of Eunoia, where we will be continuing our conversation with Takiyah Butler. Let's dive right in.
Which really made me think about the type of man I would want to be the father of my children. And if I was in an emergency and you didn't come and check on me, what would you do if my child was in a situation? Could I trust that you would be there? And I had never thought legacy before. So the same way that like this man was the first time, to your point, I thought future. I had never thought like future. Like, okay, but like who's my child gonna be? And if I have a child with this person, am I gonna be mad and regret it and treat this child in a way that I wouldn't even want to treat a child because I have resentment of the situation I chose to have a child in?
You just like made my heart beat really fast because so my timeline is the same as your timeline. I first initially I passed out twice. The first one was June 2017. And that was my wake up call. Like you said, I thought about, I want to be in love. I want to get married. But what does that like really mean? You know, what are you tying yourself to the rest of your life? And then so I passed out. He didn't care. He didn't come to the ER with me. And like after it happened, it was like you're arguing with me rather than caring about me. And then, like you said, it's your wake up call. Like, that's not the type of man that I want in my life. That's not the type of man I want to be married to or raise kids with. And so for me, it was my epiphany to be like, okay, where's your exit strategy?
Even more specifically, at one point he was supposed to be taking care of me after this blood clot. And the blood clot has like a funny story. I always have to take my own accountabilities because it was a complicated story. But one day he volunteers to like take care of me. So I'll make breakfast, blah, blah, blah. And he burned the shit out of that breakfast. Like it was so burnt. I've never seen, we live together. This man makes perfect pancakes. And this shit was burnt. Like the sausage, the pancakes, the bacon, the eggs, everything was burnt. And I was just like, when I'm infirm like this, you're going to burn my shit. So it felt like the final nail that I needed to know, like, oh, this man is not invested in me at all. And I remember asking him at one point when we were we lost a really, really good friend. And that made us think that we needed to try again, like almost in honor of this friend who had been incredibly important to my partner, but had been important to me too when I moved there. And so I remember one night asking him two things I'll say about that night. But I remember asking him why he loved me that night. And he was like, it's all the things you do for me. It's all the ways you care about me. It was every way that I gave him something. The reason I even asked that is because when we had sex that night, I won't say made love, but when we had sex that night, it was the first time I saw that he wasn't looking at me like he loved me. He was looking at me to study me. And that like broke my heart. It's taken like a couple of years to heal from that. Like that you could have that much intimacy with someone and be letting them see you in completion. And they're not looking at you because they adore or love or feel a feeling of familial connection to you. It's more like it's more like you're performing for somebody who's like trying to figure out how you work.
Yeah.
And that's like very dehumanizing.
Yeah. So, I could imagine that doesn't feel good.
Yeah. But knowing that the relationship for him was more about what I could give to him was a confirmation. I think that like that was like the final nail. So it was the blood clot. Then we had a tragedy. We thought we should pull it back, but then I had gotten wiser by then and started asking better questions.
Yeah. I think the most important question that I asked myself when I started healing after the breakup was, what made you allow that? Because going backwards, like, that that's nothing that you should ever accept. Like, if your sister accepted this, or if you had a daughter that accepted this, you would be mad, like real mad. So what was it within yourself that made you feel like this was okay, especially for this amount of time? And I had to really honestly answer that. And that's when I was like, I can't blame it all on him. I didn't even know who I was. Like, I'm sitting here demanding you do things for me. I didn't know who I was. Like, I'm not sugarcoating the terrible things that he did or emptiness that, all those things that have happened. But a big part of my journey is realizing that you're in charge of your own happiness. Taking away like true mental health issues that you have to seek therapy and help for. But like outside of that, really, you're in charge of your own happiness, and you have to decide whether is this the life you want to live for the rest of your 80 some years, God willing, or do you want something better? And I just couldn't repeat it.
Yeah, no, that's real. Self-worth was, I think, the source of my issue, like not really understanding that I was the one that brought, like, that I was the one that brought something and not understanding what it was that I brought to the table. I have two reasons for why I think I have a lot of reasons, but I think two key ones that are not about him. So, one, I think my parents got married. My parents met when they were 13 and 15, and they got married when they were like 18 and 20 or 21. And so in my mind, I was supposed to have found my husband in my teens. And so because I met him as a freshman in college, in my mind, he was still in the running of like the people that would make this fairy tale come true. Now my parents also are not together anymore. Like, you know, the relationships like come and grow and they change, and that's their story, right? Of like their relationship. But in my head, I think as the only girl, as the baby, I probably had like some fantasy things. I definitely had some fantasy things in my head that made me more likely to go back to a situation that wasn't healthy because I thought I was predestined for it. The other part, I remember telling a mentor about him at one point, and like it's nothing like an old black man mentor who just like give it to you straight. And he was like, "Damn, girl, you dickmatized or something." I was like, oh, "Am I?" I think I remember telling myself in elementary school, "Okay, Takiyah, there are pretty girls and there are ugly girls, and you're gonna be an ugly girl, so you're just gonna have to be funny. Like you're gonna have to be witty. You're gonna have to bring something else to the table because this isn't you." And I don't know. I think now I understand that I experienced a lot of jealousy as a kid that I internalized and thought was true. And so, like, now I can look at stuff and be like, that's not true. That person's projecting, or that person is just, you didn't account for the two things you did amazingly. And then the person said that to you. Like, now I understand people's words. But I think I was already primed in a lot of ways or groomed in a lot of ways to have relationships that were abusive in certain ways because it was what I thought was the norm, or I thought that I didn't have any other choices because I was bound by certain narratives I wanted to fill.
Yeah, that was a lot of important things that also kind of touch on, like, for me, it brought up the thought of cycles. So you mentioned your parents got married young. My parents got married really young too. My mom was 16, like military, from overseas. And then my sister met my brother. I call him my brother. He's my brother-in-law, but he's my brother. I've known him since I was 10 years old. They're high school sweethearts. And so, like, I never really thought about that, but I guess there was a kind of pressure that I felt like they found their love of their life when they were young. What's wrong with me? What's wrong? You know, like, I need to find mine. What's wrong with me? So thank you for pointing that out because I like to learn things. But also it kind of made me think about how, like, our parents may have stayed in cycles, but our generations are different, right? Like, our parents had different goals and they were also doing the best that they could at that time. But from conversations that I hear, like my aunts, my uncle, my grandparents, it's all about like security and stability and just going to work, maintaining your family, and then you're good. But I feel like now our generation is like, nah, that's not really it. Like, we thought that was it, but I want to be happy, like, and fulfilled. So we're kind of breaking those, learning as we go and breaking those cycles.
Yeah, and let me give props to my mom too, because I don't think my mom wanted to. I think in my mom's, because my grandparents were married for 60 years, they passed away like 3 months apart. Like I feel like they did it the way that we all think it's supposed to be done. But everybody's grandpas have, like, you know, some other things that they did, or all these imperfections that you find out about later, but they're still your grandfather. My mom, I think, found a better partner, to your point, found a better partner, one that didn't do certain things. And so I think there's credence to be given and kudos to be given for evolved choices. And I was always encouraged by my grandmother and my mom, my great grandmothers, to like stay free, like to be a certain type of person. I think one of the main reasons why I was able to stay free in that situation where I had a relationship that was toxic was because I watched how my mom rebuilt herself after leaving a toxic situation. And so, like, she rebuilt herself from scratch. And like, is doing amazingly. Like it's still like is in such a peaceful place. And so I think when my brothers and I, when we talk about that, we're all like we all have a lot of joy about where she's been able to get herself. But I studied it as a young woman, knowing that like there's never a situation where somebody's going to break me. I don't know that world. I know the world where you like politely and quietly scoot over here. Now, I don't know if I want my daughter to do it politely and quietly if she has to. I would like her to make all the noise as she walks out of some bullshit. Like I would love for her to smack shit off the table. I want to do all that shit.
And another thing.
Exactly, because I want her to be freer than me. But honestly, I don't want her to be in that situation at all. I want her to never even know that world. The same with if there's things that my mom does not know, like that maybe my grandmother experienced, my great grandmother experienced. I think we're all trying to be a little better than the generation before, but we're also all learning really good lessons from the people that came before us that helped keep us alive.
Yes.
Because I think their focus was survival.
Yeah.
And I think we're hoping to thrive in this next generation, and that generations beyond that start to thrive, which is all anybody in our lineages ever really wanted. So I try to be graceful for the ways that, my parents and my grandparents and whomever like didn't have opportunities, and the way that they took and made certain choices to make me better. But I also see how I inherited certain grit.
Yeah.
So I feel she's grittier than me when she comes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important because we didn't really have conversations about relationships or anything growing up in my household, at least. And so, like you said, you paid attention to your mom and seeing all that when you were younger. My parents didn't divorce until I was older, so I didn't really see like growth stages like that. It was just they're married, that's it. But
Who were you when they got divorced?
I was probably like, I don't remember what year they got divorced, 28-ish. It was right before I moved to California. I moved to California in 2015.
So I was 21 when my parents got divorced.
Oh.
Right out of college. They were married for like 37 years before they got divorced. But 21 is young though. That's why I asked you, because 21 is such a pivotal year. It's like when you just got out of college, when you everything. So it was such an unsettling space. So I think you're still right, because 28 is definitely a whole different age group. But 20, I guess I'm trying to make the point that people don't know how important it is for that opportunity youth group when their parents get divorced. That's a very unsettling thing because they still need support.
Yeah, it is. And I'm glad you pointed out your age, because in my head, like I was thinking younger than that. I was thinking, yeah, younger, but you're right. 21 is young. You're still growing. You still don't know anything. You're still like looking to your parents and everyone around you for guidance or some type of lesson that you can take away. So it's important to point that out.
And their house is kind of usually still your house.
Yeah.
So like when they start going through divorces, it's like, okay, well, hold up. Where do I live?
Right. What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? And I didn't plan on talking about this, but we are kind of going there. I'm not going to, tell my parents' story or anything, but it's weird to have your parents get divorced after such a long time, and you're an adult. Like, I don't know. For me, it was weird. I feel like it's still an adjustment. And sometimes when I think about it, I feel like you're grown. Why are you affected by your parents' divorce, right? But that's huge. Those are your parents. Those are like your whole foundation of your childhood, especially if your parents get divorced in a older age. After a lot of years, it really kind of shakes things up.
Yeah, I will say that it does shake things up, and like it just does. Like it's gonna, the loss of, I truly believe when two people get married, they become one.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a death that happens when there's a divorce or a separation or the ending of a relationship. Like, and I know my mother's grief so much deeper now, the more that I've had my own grief. So I remember when I was young and how I responded to my mom's choices. And like, I didn't have grace for them because I didn't understand. And like, because we're so similar, I truly understand now because I really found myself in the same situations. But I don't know that I feel like I finally met my parents after they got divorced. Like, I feel like I got to know them better as individual people and as human beings. Like, I didn't know my mom was funny like she is. Like, I didn't know she was like witty. What did you just say? Funny. Like, she like will make these comments and you're like, that's mad hilarious. I didn't know that she was that person because she had been carrying so much stress all the time. That the way she was showing up in relationship with me didn't look like that. And it's not like she changed into this overnight person, but there was a difference in personality. I got to see my dad a lot more differently and have a relationship with him separately. So I think there's a when you're older is interesting because it's like there's opportunity to see and be in a different relationship, but it also really depends on how your parents have managed their own grief in the
Yeah.
situation. So, like, when you're older, they may or may not tell you a whole bunch of stuff, but in general, they know. I think they still deal with the guilt of, we had kids and we changed their world, and their willingness to confront that makes a huge difference in how you heal as a family.
Yeah, that's very true too. And I think it also goes back to like the cycles of life. Like we're never ever the same person as we were yesterday, a year ago, 3 years ago. So we kind of have to accept the flow and the cycle of life and change rather than hold on to the resistance of it.
That's it. Yep, stop resisting.
So, okay, I want to ask a couple more questions before we wrap up. So, advice for your younger self.
So that's funny because I think they asked me that question at YBIB. So I'm going to bring that answer back.
Okay.
See if I have anything left. So what I said there was, it's funny because I feel like my younger self is actually giving me advice right now, because I took so many notes in so many places. And so now I'm towards the end of a season of pulling all those pieces together, and it's been really dope to look at things. So I feel so full in my relationship with my younger self that I'm not sure I have anything for her because I see how all those things need to happen. But I think if I could say anything to her, it probably would be like, you're way more loved than you realize. Like, you are way more loved than you realize. And you think that the little thing you do is going to like make people stop loving you, because the people who say they love you don't love you. But there are a bunch of people who are not saying they love you who love the shit out of you.
Yes, that's very important. And I think I still learn that too, sometimes as an adult. Like, I have my podcast, and I don't really ask people if they listen to it because I don't want people to feel pressured to listen to it. And then I also don't necessarily want to know that they don't listen to it. If they're people that I've known a really long time, just being honest.
Don't ask questions you don't want the answer to.
Exactly. But then when you hear people have conversations and then bring up things that you don't think they're paying attention to, it really like reminds you that people pay attention. The people that pay attention are the ones that don't really say much. The people that are saying a lot are the ones that, it's a lot of
When you've been in narcissistic relationships, that's a total flip in understanding. I had a really good friend say to me, I'm sorry to diverge us here. I had a really good friend. I was telling him, like, basically, I was like, I'm just trying to find a good man. Like, and so I'm like, what do I do? You're a good man, but I don't want you. So what do I do? And he's like, you're probably used to men hitting on you. And so the men that are hitting on, because you're just busy, you're just doing other stuff. So the men who are hitting on you are probably the men that hit on everybody. And so you really should go and like find a man who's minding his business and be like, hi, how are you? I like you. And I was like, okay, I'll try that. So I tried it. And so I go on a date with this guy, and I bring up something from some post or something. And he's like, yeah, I saw that. And then he starts asking all these follow-up questions. And I was like, you listen to my stuff? Wow, okay. So to your point, I think it's absolutely true. And, who knows what happens with the situation. But I think you're absolutely right that there are people who are, admiring you as they live their lives, not trying to overtake you, not trying to do anything to you in any way that harms or suffocates or limits you. And, being open and being vulnerable and being present in the world is good for those who end up becoming codependent, because it gives you a chance to also be seen by people who can be good for you. And if you have the right boundaries and you have the right tools and you have the right materials, you'll know how to choose and discern between them.
Yes. And you wouldn't really know how to discern if you didn't kind of go through the shittiness of the unwelcoming people,
Because my radar is crazy. Like, nope, I saw that. And this is not hypervigilance, because I'm also hypervigilant about that.
Yeah, it's like I was a little blind back then, but now I can see everything. You can't get nothing past me.
This smells like a cage. I don't even like it in here. I'm gone.
Maybe a little, so much so where I feel like I self-sabotage a little bit because, you have your well up because you are used to having to protect yourself. And then you also don't want to repeat those cycles and put yourself in another situation that feels anything like that.
But this is a
I'm,
relationship practice.
yeah, I'm recognizing that you do more harm than good sometimes. You just kind of have to find a nice balance and not always be up here. You got to come down a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. And trust that you're a good person and that people will find you. That's the thing I always have to remind myself of, like, kid, you're not the things that certain people have said to you.
Yeah.
And now that you're in a new space and a new season with a new environment around you, you are free to feel good about yourself. And what would you do if you felt good about yourself in the situation? What would you do if you were doing it from a place of love for yourself? I'm really trying to embrace that and let people see me and trust that I'm the warrior inside of me that can, like, actually get rid of the ones that don't need to be here and can still be love and protection and care for those who do.
Yes, yes, a loving warrior, always working to heal. There are two things that I think are really important to talk about before we go. So, we mentioned stress, and I don't know if people realize that stress really does have a long-term effect on you, and it can affect you physically, and we shouldn't always ignore the warning signs. So, do you have any thoughts or anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I have a whole body of knowledge I would love to add to that. But so we talk a lot about emotional intelligence, which I think is important for recognizing or naming or labeling what you're experiencing. But I think deeper than that is something called somatic awareness. So, like, the awareness of your body. So, like, do you notice when your jaws clench? Do you notice when your forehead's clench? Do you notice certain things about your body? And are you mindful about that? I think those two things actually connect. I think when you have awareness of your body, you become even more aware of your emotions and aware of them at a point in time you can actually do something about them. So not when they're, like, boiling over into this expression towards others, but when they're just really actually a small thing inside of you, and so you can do the work. And so I think that's where that's the greatest benefit of yoga, of biking, of being outside, of going in nature, all those things is really actually like the slow down time. So I am working personally on, like, spending some of that time without my headphones, some of that time, without distractions, and some time, like, really just, like, outside, like, listening to the birds chirp, listening to things. And it's not because I'm, like, some sort of, like, monk somewhere, but it's more so I'm just trying to train my brain to have less coming into it so that I can focus on what's happening inside of it. And if I can build that muscle, it helps me, like, preempt stress.
And you don't really hear yourself. Like, I love music. I used to always hike. Every time I would hike, I have my headphones on and whatever. I'd be in my element and it was great. But then I also realized, like, I wanted to go out there for meditation. And it's kind of a meditation, but you're not really allowing your mind to be quiet. You're not allowing yourself to hear your own thoughts. You're not allowing yourself to feel and hear the nature and, everything around you. So I think it's important that you mention that too. That's a good thing too. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about, which I feel like I'm still healing from, is the shame and the guilt associated with being in a toxic relationship. I feel like, so my relationship lasted almost 8 years, and it took me, I would say, the bulk of it was unhealthy. Like, I knew I should have moved to California without him. I knew I should have been single. Like, it was probably only good maybe 2 years, if I'm being honest. And so I never talked about anything, also because I didn't recognize, like you said, that some of these things weren't healthy. But I also felt like I need to make this work. I need to be in a healthy relationship. I don't want to be looked at as, like, looked down upon, or even let people know that I allowed these things to happen. And I don't know. I just think it's important to talk about because a lot of people probably feel those emotions.
Yeah. Wow. This is the opportunity. Not even just about that relationship, but actually one that happened last year. I was really embarrassed because I had the experience prior and I felt like I should know better. In reality, I knew quicker. I solved it quicker. I spoke up. I did way more things than what I had done the time before. And it took my friends reminding me of that, like, hey, but you made the better decision this time. But like they would say that, and so it would make me feel better, like less angry. Like, okay, I took some, I'm empowered here a little more, but I was still embarrassed that I had allowed this type of person to be near me. Um, it was a lot of older women that reassured me when I told them those words. Like, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed. Because in their minds, I shouldn't be embarrassed about this person. In their mind, this was a good person on paper, and you shouldn't be embarrassed. And I had to keep, so I appreciated their, their holding my hand, but I had to really investigate the embarrassment. And I think it was because, like, intuitively, I knew I wasn't supposed to do it. And so I don't like shame. I really like that show, Big Mouth on Netflix. That has like the kids going through puberty, and I love how they personify certain things. So they have like a shame, I forgot his name, it's like shame monster or shame devil or something. And then they have a gratitude who like only comes. They had a love bug this last season. I really love these things. But the way the shame character would do it's like it would slither and it would say these things in your ear, like, oh, you're such a terrible person. You're such that no one likes you, blah, 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 blah. Shame is like talking to yourself like your abuser. It's like allowing your abuser to continue to live in your head or allowing the person to continue to live in your world and like pay and like live rent free in your head. And you don't have to feel shame if you don't want to. Someone I just went to coffee with, like a young man that I think is an amazing person. And he was telling me about the show Lucifer. And I usually don't watch shows that like are about Satan. Like I try to not watch those shows. But he was saying how one of the parts of the story was that like you were only in hell because you feel guilty. And as soon as you stop feeling guilty or you stop feeling shame, you like go to heaven. And I thought that was really important. Like, and I was like, he's telling me, and I'm like, that's actually a pretty good interpretation of the Bible. Like, that's actually kind of the good news. Interesting. But the point of like, your shame is keeping you in a fire that you don't have to be in. Your shame is like beating yourself up. Your shame and your guilt is like constantly making yourself, it's like re-traumatizing yourself. And just quite simply, you just don't deserve that. Like, you do deserve the better things. You do deserve a world where you don't have that. And if you can't give it for yourself, I suggest co-regulation with somebody else until you can get it for yourself. So that's where the community actually does really benefit you, because it gives you people who can remind you who you are in these moments where you're questioning it. Because I think that's what shame really is like, well, I did this bad thing, or I did this thing that wasn't good. I did this thing that took away. Does it mean I'm only worth the takeaway? Does it mean that I make bad choices? Does it all these different ways that this thing can come in your ear and try and twist it in a way that makes you uneasy? You need a safety net of people around you to be like, hey, step out of it. No, it's none of that. You've been beautiful. You are beautiful. You're not perfect. And you walk you through your flaws, but you are not in a space where you have to give up, and you can still have hope here. If you get to the point of hopelessness, which is what shame pulls you down into, it's very hard to vibrate at the frequencies you need to attract good things in your life. So it's really worth letting go of the shame so you can be in higher vibrations.
Yes, if I was at a poetry slam, I would totally snap. Because you do have to utilize your support systems no matter how much isolation does help sometimes. I think that if I would have actually utilized my support system, I wouldn't have been in that relationship for almost 8 years. Like, no, there was no way. But because I chose to go through it alone, it lasted longer, which obviously those are life lessons that I needed to grow. But just perspective for everyone out there, you can go through things alone, but it may take a little bit longer. It may be a little bit harder, or you could potentially find a balance and use your support system and come out of it a little bit easier. Maybe not easier, but quicker.
Yeah, and less pieces, maybe. Yeah. But I really hope I remember what I was about to say. I want to speak to how the urge to be alone is kind of part of what a narcissist will do to you as well. That they will like move you away from the people that you care about and your support systems, because those support systems inevitably, to your point, will tell you, hey, this isn't healthy. Hey, this isn't good. We went to a gala that normally we would go to galas that were always his, like, because of him. And this was the first time we're going to a gala because of me. And the whole night he's just starting stuff. And all of my friends, like this women's organization. And so all the other women are getting so annoyed with him. And they're coming to me and they're like, Takiyah, I don't know why you keep talking to him, because he is clearly trying to make your night about him. And it was something I had never even noticed before.
Yeah.
So I think if you've been in, especially like relationships with legitimately narcissistic individuals, if that's the real personality disorder you're dealing with, you might have certain things that have rubbed off on you that are not actually truly who you are. And so like it really does require breaking all that stuff down and like really asking yourself, who do I want to be? What do I want my house to feel like? What do I want my world to be like? And then working backwards from that. Because whatever assumptions you have right now may very well likely be tainted by what you came out of.
Very, very true. So can we finish off on a positive note with maybe some green flags that you would look for or advise people to look for if you were to give advice?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm still single, so everything I say you should take with a grain of salt. But I'm dating well. My dates are going well.
Yeah.
So what I would say is men, I will start in a very heterosexual way. I find that men are very much looking to be listened to and heard. And I think women are desiring to be listened to and heard as well. But I think what each opposite group thinks listening is not actually listening. And so that's something you have to co-create with your partner. I think in all relationships, more generally, a green flag for me is feeling peace and feeling like I can dance, like feeling I can do all the things I do when nobody's around, I can do with this person, and I feel safe and I don't feel judged and I don't feel uncomfortable. So I think any relationship that brings you peace, whether it's platonic or romantic, is one that's worth maintaining or one that's worth investing in. And then I think my last green flag would be, how do they respond to your bids for support or your bids for connection? Do they respond in a way that makes you feel like you want to continue to give bids? Do they respond in a way that makes you feel like they are ignoring you? Like how do you feel when you reach out? This is a green flag because it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the other person, but it's a green flag from you about vulnerability. And it's like the action you're going to have to take to even begin to get the person you want. There's nothing anybody can do to love you if you're not already being willing to step out. So I think the greatest green flag is like your own behaviors in relationships and finding somebody who's responding to that in a way that makes you feel at peace.
Yes, I love that. And that brings me back to one thing that you said about the therapy, about like the coin being drained, that
That's it.
analogy.
Yep.
Kind of like you want to make sure that your coins are all full before you try to find someone else, because two half-filled coin bases are not going to be able to complete each other at all. You keep cycling through emptiness. But
Yeah. And that you don't, I guess another thing is you don't have to be perfect. So like I got my traumas, and whoever I end up with is probably gonna have traumas because we have met at least in our 30s. So I'm sure both of us have gone through some things. Do you leave space for me to be like, hey, I don't even like the way I said that to you, or I said that this way because I'm still working through this. Can I have a mulligan? Can I have grace? Can I try again? I think the best relationships I've had have always had a deep sense of grace in them, that allow us to both like grow into what we needed to become on our own and together.
absolutely. I love that. And I love this entire conversation today.
It's
So
very
thank
fun.
you so much for joining us. Did you have anything else you wanted to add before we go, and give everybody like your social media website, how they can follow you?
Yeah, sure. So my Instagram is Talk Verbs, so TAK Verbs, like Proverbs. And that's usually a place where I'm like posting stories. I'm posting kind of a backstory. And also it's a good way to see the journey that I'm even referencing and seeing kind of where it's come. In the next couple of months, I'll be releasing the website. So the website's going to be riseoverrun.org. So the idea is like you have a slope, and what's your rise over run? And so that's going to be in January. That website will be up and moving with some information about how to contact me if you want to have coaching, if you're looking for facilitation, how to do some of those things. But the day-to-day stuff is mostly available through my Instagram at Top First.
Yay. Well, Wolfpack, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please make sure you give Takiyah a follow. She's got some great content on her page. And as you can tell, great conversation and pointers. I hope you enjoyed the show. See you next week.